Chapter 4, Topic 4.1, The History of Eukaryotes. This topic will discuss the evolution of the eukaryotic cell, so far as we currently understand it. Under this heading, we will talk about the last common ancestor, endosymbiosis, during which we're going to talk about how the nucleus arose, the endoplasmic reticulum, and mitochondria and chloroplasts, and also multicellular organisms. At the end of this recorded lecture, you should be able to relate both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells to the last common ancestor, discuss some of the evidence for the theory of endosymbiosis, and list the types of eukaryotic microorganisms. Once upon a time, scientists hypothesized that eukaryotic cells evolved from bacteria. It made sense. Bacteria seemed to be more primitive, and there were older fossil evidence for prokaryotes than for eukaryotes. And at the time, all prokaryotes were bacteria, since we hadn't discovered the differences between bacteria and archaea yet. Current genetic evidence, such as the relatedness of archaea to eukaryotic cells, has given rise to the theory that eukaryotic cells arose from what is called the last common ancestor. The last common ancestor was prokaryotic, in that it didn't have a nucleus, but it probably had characteristics that are shared by all types of cells, bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. The ancestors of bacteria split off from the last common ancestor population, and they developed characteristics that are unique to bacteria, such as peptidoglycan. The other group developed characteristics that are similar to both archaea and eukaryotes, such as histone-like proteins for wrapping their DNA, and a similar shape to their ribosomes. Then the populations of archaea and eukaryotes split off from each other, and each developed their own unique characteristics. Of course, the most unique characteristics of eukaryotes is the nucleus, or the double membrane layer that surrounds DNA in eukaryotic cells. So let's talk about how we think that various unique eukaryotic structures arose. It is thought that the nucleus arose from the cytoplasm kind of pinching off and surrounding the DNA, becoming a protonucleus. Now, somewhere along the line, these early eukaryotes formed a symbiotic relationship with an aerobic prokaryote. That's a prokaryote that uses oxygen to produce energy. These aerobic prokaryotes could have been intended as food, but they managed to survive in the early eukaryotic cell. Or they could have been parasites that eventually started helping as well as living off the cell they were in. In any case, they became mitochondria, which all eukaryotic cells have. Mitochondria function in producing most of the energy, or ATP, for the cell. Mitochondria have their own DNA, and this DNA indicates that they are most closely related to the group of bacteria that includes E. coli. Yes, everything comes back to E. coli in this class. More folds pinched off from the cytoplasmic membrane that eventually became the nuclear envelope and the early endoplasmic reticulum. We will be discussing these organelles in more detail in the next topic. Now, here is the ancestral cell for the early eukaryote. Now, some populations went on and became protozoa, fungi, and animals. Others had a second endosymbiotic event. Endo meaning in, symbiosis for two organisms living together and both benefiting. But with endosymbiosis, one of the organisms lives inside of the other one. So the first endosymbiotic event was the formation of mitochondria. The second, for those cells that eventually developed into algae and higher plants, a photosynthetic bacterium was engulfed, either through intending to be food or they were parasites, and eventually became chloroplasts. Chloroplasts function in photosynthesis. Like mitochondria, chloroplasts have their own DNA. This DNA indicates that chloroplasts are most closely related to cyanobacteria. Now, most eukaryotes have remained unicellular. In other words, they are organisms that are composed of just one cell. That would be all of your protozoa, well, most of your protozoa, some of your fungi, okay, and some algae. But some eukaryotes went on and developed and became multicellular. Cells in a multicellular organism work together, each type doing a different job for the whole organism. We humans are an example of just such a multicellular organism. Plants, some algae, fungi, and other animals are the only groups of eukaryotes that are multicellular. That's it for the glorious history of the eukaryotic cell. Yay, us! You should now be able to relate both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells to the last common ancestor, discuss some of the evidence for the theory of endosymbiosis, and list the types of eukaryotic microorganisms.